NWA Starrcade 1986, Night of the Skywalkers, and this is a Starrcade with maybe a little bit of a dark cloud over it. Not because of anything the NWA did or anything like that, but because this is the Starrcade, which is taking place only a couple months after that tragic accident that Magnum TA was involved in, which paralyzed him till today. He's still, unfortunately, not able to live like a normal person. And Magnum TA was really on the rise during this time, and who knows where he could have gone or where he would have placed on this card. Starrcade 1986 took place from two different venues. They still continuing with the two venue system. This one took place from Atlanta, Georgia, and then, of course, the Greensboro Coliseum in North Carolina, as always. We then got introed to the show by Tony Schiavone and Rick Stewart at the Omni in Atlanta. And then they took us into the show going back to Greensboro, where we had our first match, which was Nelson Royale and Tim Horner taking on Don Kernodle and Rocky Kernodle. This match honestly surprised me because I've come and watching other Starrcades, I've understood that the opening matches suck. They just suck. But this one did not suck whatsoever. It honestly really surprised me. So it was a relatively short match, nothing over the top. But Rocky Kernodle and Tim Horner start off with some good arm drags and some good counter wrestling, and that's when I knew, okay, these two youngsters that they started off with can really work. And we then got a power slam by Don Kernodle to Tim Horner, which forces him to make the tag to Nelson Royale. Nelson Royale and Tim Horner then begin dominating Don Kernodle and isolating him on their side of the ring, typical tag team action. Don eventually tags out while Royale has him in a sleeper hold, which then allows for Rocky Kernodle to land a double axe handle like off the top rope onto the back of Royale. Both Horner and Rocky go for a leapfrog, but they end up headbutting each other at the same time. So like they both were running the ropes and they both had the idea of a leapfrog, and then they both headbutted at each other at the same time. I thought that was a really cool looking spot. Like I've never seen that been done, and I really like that. Big clothesline by Don Kernodle to Horner, which allows the Kernodle brothers to dominate for the moment. Horner, though, then reverses an O'Connor roll by Kernodle to get the win for his team. So there was a O'Connor roll that was looking for a pin, but Horner reversed that into a pin of his own and got the victory. Really cool finish, like decent match. There was some really good pro wrestling. There was probably a lack of intensity and story to the match, but as just a pro wrestling match, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the work. The work was clean. There was some good pro wrestling. It wasn't just boom, bap, bam strikes and a little bit of nothing with a bit of headlocks. There was some real pro wrestling in here, and I enjoyed that. 2.75 stars. I think that is maybe the highest opening match we've given on this channel for our old timeline or our retro timeline. So good for them, man. Good for them. We then move to Atlanta now, where we got Brad Armstrong taking on gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. Just so you guys are aware, it basically goes from Greensboro to Atlanta to Greensboro to Atlanta to Greensboro to Atlanta. 1-1-1 throughout the card. So I'm not going to say where everyone is, but just know we're Atlanta now. The next one is going to be from the Greensboro Coliseum. Anyway, the scaffolding structure at the Atlanta show was pretty much an eyesore for most of the show. I'm going to be honest. Like, you're trying to watch this match, but there's this huge scaffolding structure that's there for later on in the night where we have the scaffold match. We love one of those. But yeah, really an eyesore. Nice strong collar and elbow tie-up to start off with a bit of rough housing. And when that happened, I thought, good match incoming. But not what we had. We got a lot of back and forth holds, headlocks, arm locks, basically just holds the whole match, which I didn't enjoy. I'm not even going to talk too much about it. There was a little bit of back and forth struggle between the holds between both men, but they never really changed gears at all. Eventually, though, Jimmy Valiant sends Armstrong out of the ring to boos from the crowd, and then things started heating up for the final 2 minutes. I say final 2 minutes of the match. This match went to a time limit draw. They did all these holds just so they could get to 15 minutes because these guys apparently can't work more than a 5-minute match. Disappointing. Things really started heating up in the final 2 minutes with Brad eating a big knee from Garvin for a 2 count. Both men with roll-ups back and forth to try and get the win before the time runs out, but obviously both kicked out. Garvin then goes to the top rope, misses with a dive, and as he lands, the bell rings for the time limit draw. The match was okay. Like, the work they did on the mats was good, solid, technical wrestling to a certain extent, but just boring. They never changed gears. They never changed gears. Like, you can work that match. I have no problem with you working a match with a lot of holds and a lot more technical on the mat based stuff, but change gears, get things going. There's ways to do it. Boring for large parts of the match. That's fine. They just needed to change the pace. 2.25 stars. Yeah, not for me. Not for me. We then had a match between Baron van Resch, I hope I've pronounced that name, and Hector Guerrero, of course, Eddie Guerrero's brother, if you guys didn't know. Also, yeah, I'll actually say, I was about to say something, but you guys will see a little video from me about Hector Guerrero soon. You probably know it, but there's people that don't know it. Versus Shaska Watley and the Barbarian. The Barbarian can actually move during this period. He loses his movement soon after, but he can move right now. Shaska and the Barbarian target Hector and, I'm going to struggle to say this name. I'm just going to say Baron every time. Hector and Baron from the get-go, which eventually turns into Hector and Baron. Watley going at it. So that was all four men going at it, and then eventually just Hector Guerrero and Watley are left in the ring going at it. Hector sends the Barbarian to the outside and dives over the top rope to take him out. We've all seen that, but the commentators absolutely loved it. They went wild for it, which I appreciate, man. I appreciate seeing crazy things at that time. It gives me the feeling of, like, what was it like to see these things for the first time as well. The Barbarian and Watley then isolate and target Hector Guerrero with quick tags and double team moves, but eventually Baron finally gets the hot tag, but it's fairly uneventful. As the crowd just still prefer Hector over everything else in this match. They don't care for anyone else in this match, if I'm being honest. So when that hot tag came, it was like, yeah, but let's see Hector. We then got the 3 counts from Baron on Watley after a standing elbow drop. 1, 2, 3. And then, post-match, Baron and Watley attack... the Barbarian and Watley attack Baron and Hector Guerrero, but not much to it. Hector was the star of the match. Everything else was highly uninspiring, and it just felt like a group of misfits wrestling together. Like, none of these pairings made any sense to me. 1.75 stars. We can move on, I think. We can move on. We then had the Russians, which was Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev, the current champions, taking on the Kansas Jayhawks, which was Bobby Jaggers and Dutch Mantel in a no disqualification match. Not a terrible match. It was alright. Let's get into it. There was a quick start after a backdrop from Dutch to Ivan Koloff. Quick tags between the Jayhawks to isolate and target Ivan Koloff, of course. But then Ivan tags in Crusher, and this is where they begin to dominate Dutch Mantel. So pretty back and forth stuff up to this point in the match. The match is filled with quick tags and some quick strikes. It certainly doesn't feel like a no DQ match for the most part, and definitely up to this point. Crusher then drops Dutch Mantel knee first on the guard railing on the outside, and then Dutch Mantel gets worked for a long period of time until he finally gets the tag to Bobby Jaggers, who lands a clothesline to Ivan for the pin, but Crusher Khrushchev stops it. Ivan then uses Dutch Mantel uses the whip on the Russians, so a whip that they assume they brought from ringside or from the back, onto the Russians. Finally, it feels like a no DQ match. But then while he's doing this, Jaggers uses Koloff's chain. Ivan uses Koloff's chain to hit Jaggers in the back with it, putting him down, and then the Russians get the win. 2.25 stars. I just think it didn't feel like a no DQ match. But I know why, because they had so many other stipulation matches throughout the card that they kind of didn't want to make this one too over the top, because they've got more to come. But uneventful, 2.25 stars. It was alright. The work was decent. We then get Rick Rude versus Wahoo McDaniels, and this is the first time I'm seeing Rick Rude during this retro timeline. I know we're going to see him a lot more, but in the WWF rather, coming soon actually. I know it's real soon he ends up there, but anyway, this was an Indian strap match. Basically, it's the four corners strap match. Those are never great. They kind of have a ceiling that you can't really break, but we'll get into it anyway. So this is a touch all corners match, and Rick Rude starts off with some dominance and beats Wahoo in the corner with constant strikes, so constant punches, constant knees, stuff like that. But then Wahoo comes back with a power slam and then tries to touch all four corners, but gets stopped on the second corner. Rick Rude then gets some color, and Wahoo tries to wear him out more and more so that he can get to the corners. Wahoo then touches three of the turnbuckles, but Rude fights back to stop him from getting to the fourth. Then there's a big knee drop from the top rope by Rick Rude, which was pretty clean. He then gets to the top for another move, but Wahoo then pulls him off with the strap. So because his strap's attached to him, he pulls him down. Wahoo then touches three of the turnbuckles, goes for the fourth, but Rick Rude punches him and punches him into the fourth one. And I'm like, should the match not be over now? Because the ref didn't do anything for quite a while. They didn't make the call. But eventually they rang the bell, and eventually Wahoo McDaniel was announced as the winner. The finish came out of nowhere. I didn't like the finish. It made Rick Rude look kind of silly for punching him into the corner. This format never usually delivers any good matches, to be honest. The match was also fairly short. Rick Rude felt limited to what he can usually do. 1.75 stars. Not that impressed. Don't like this match format. And Wahoo McDaniel is about 40 years over his peak. So let's move on to Sam Houston, the current NWA Central States Heavyweight Champion, as he takes on Bill Dundee. This was a fairly average match. Nothing to complain about really. But Sam Houston starts off like a house on fire, like we know from Sam Houston in previous Starrcade events. Nice head scissors takedown from Sam Houston, and then he holds onto the head scissors hold for quite a while. There's an O'Connor roll from Houston, but Dundee pulls the trunks to get out of it. Bill Dundee sent Houston over, more like through the ropes to the outside, and then Houston lands an atomic drop on the outside, which sends Dundee over the guardrail in pain. Dundee then lands a huge top rope punch to the face, kind of like Jerry Lawler also does. And then Dundee starts throwing some of his iconic punches, sending Houston to the mat. Quick jabs, quick strikes. Him and Jerry Lawler honestly throw some of the best punches in pro wrestling. We then get a Boston Crab by Dundee, which Houston fights out of. And then Dundee runs the ropes for a double axe handle, but only gets a 2 count on the pin. We then get a power slam and a knee drop attempt by Houston, but Dundee gets out of the way of the knee drop. Dundee then uses Houston's boot, which fell off, to take out Houston, but the ref sees this and calls it DQ. Why did we need that finish? Like, the action was pretty good up until that finish. I was enjoying it. And then, the DQ finish. I don't know why we have to do silly finishes. Why could they not just... I suppose they didn't want to put the title on Dundee, and they wanted to keep the title on Sam Houston, but... surely you can just have Sam Houston beat Dundee. Why does Dundee need to be protected that much? Anyway, 2.5 stars. Let's move on. We had Jimmy Valiant versus Paul Jones in a hair versus hair match. Firstly, this is a no rating match, and I'm glad it's a no rating match. Just putting that out there. Because it didn't go 5 minutes. But basically, a fight breaks out as Manny Fernandez, who is at ringside of Paul Jones, doesn't want to get in the shark cage that's going to be held up across the ring, so he doesn't get involved. But eventually some of the faces come out and they just beat him into the cage, basically. Valiant then with big strikes. Valiant starts off with some big strikes and tosses Jones around to start things off, making it look easy. Jones then tries to fight back, but Valiant just arm drags him down to the mat. But then eventually Jones grabs an object out of his trunks and hits Valiant with it, causing him to bleed. But he can't get the pinfall off of that specific strike. Jones then tries an Indian deathlock, but Valiant stops him and begins to fire back. Valiant then uses Jones's object on Jones himself and gets the pinfall victory that way. Post-match, Jones's hair shaved, and eventually Manny Fernandez is let down, and then Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez attack Valiant post-match and DDT him into a steel chair, actually. Like an elevated DDT into a steel chair. And there was a lot of concern over Jimmy Valiant and the blood all over his face and all of that. No rating for this match, like I said. not great. Not great. I haven't enjoyed a single Jimmy Valiant match since the first Starrcade where we watched him. Yeah, and who was he then? He was the guy in the mask, Chucky T or something. I don't know. I can't remember what his name was now, but it was terrible. It was terrible. Then we had probably one of my favorite matches of the card, actually. Bubba Rogers, which of course becomes Big Boss Man in the future. He takes on Ronnie Garvin. This is a young Big Boss Man, like I wrote there. Big strikes from Garvin to Bubba, but he does not go down. He is a big man with Jim Cornette obviously at ringside with him. Bubba tries to then bait Garvin into a test of strength, but Garvin doesn't fall for it and lands some big strikes, causing Bubba to fall to the outside. And this is where Jim Cornette is like trying to rile him up here, trying to get him going. Bubba then gets into the ring angry because of what Jim Cornette's saying to him, and this is where he begins to show his power. Garvin then grabs a drink from a table and throws it into Bubba's face. The crowd just absolutely love every punch from Garvin as they go, ooh, with every punch. And I love that, man. I love that. I wish that's something that we could bring back into pro wrestling now. With big punches, just a big ooh. Big strikes from Bubba, which puts Garvin to the mat, and he starts barely making it up to 10. And they do this a couple times with like more power slams and more punches, and he eventually just gets up just before 10. We eventually get to both men bleeding as Bubba puts Garvin in a bear hug until Garvin fights back with some big headbutts. Just as Bubba looks out on his feet, he begins fighting back, and Bubba goes to the top rope, but Garvin gets there just in time and tosses him off the top rope, kind of like what Ric Flair does. And then Garvin goes for the pin, but Bubba pushes him off and pushes him into the referee. Garvin then gets hit with a pile driver into Bubba, which looked awesome. Like that pile driver, just such a big man getting pile driven by Garvin, looked awesome. And then Garvin gets hit with the racket by Jim Cornette, and they both down. The ref gets up, he starts counting them both, and he counts them both to 10. But he says this can't end like that. This has to end. The first person to get up wins the match. And they both start crawling to their feet. But Jimmy Garvin gets up, but the ref is distracted with Bubba as Bubba's pulling on the ref, and that allows Jim Cornette to hit Garvin, and he goes down again, and Bubba gets up, and he wins. So Jimmy Garvin was supposed to win, but Jim Cornette got involved, and Bubba got the win. This match was so much fun. I liked the finish. The finish was different. The finish was exciting. That moment where you're waiting for them both to get up was pretty exciting. Big win for Bubba in one of his biggest matches of his career at this time. The strikes and the execution was great, and I just thoroughly enjoyed this match, man. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Therefore, I gave it 3.25 stars. Potentially a 3.5 star match. Potentially. When I record it down, it might change to a 3.5. So just keep that in mind, guys. Really fun match. We then had Dusty Rhodes taking on Tully Blanchard in a first blood match. Now, these matches can always be a bit shaky, but sometimes they can be really good. And you know what? The psychology of this one was pretty damn enjoyable. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It was pretty damn enjoyable. So basically, what happens is JJ Dillon puts like a protective headgear onto Tully. The ref takes it off. He then puts Vaseline. The ref wipes it off. And you can already see the shenanigans that JJ Dillon and Tully are trying to start off the night with. JJ Dillon again gets in the face of Dusty Rhodes, and he eats a big elbow for his troubles, and that causes him to bleed instantly, which I loved. Why? Because it set up that elbow as being dangerous, and that elbow can draw blood instantly. And that is basically what this whole match was about. Dusty Rhodes trying to land strikes, land that elbow, but Tully getting out the way every time, running away every time, hiding away every time. And then them both avoiding strikes to the head. That's basically what most of this match was about. Eventually, though, the ref gets bumped out the way, and JJ Dillon passes Tully his shoe, which Dusty gets a hold of but doesn't use, and Dusty rather decides to just go and punch Tully in the face constantly, which actually causes him to bleed, but the ref is still down. So JJ Dillon manages to wipe the blood away, clean the wound, and then Tully uses a roll of coins that JJ passes him and hits Dusty in the face, which causes Dusty to bleed. And as the ref gets up, that's the first thing he sees. Therefore, Tully Blanchard wins, even though he was bleeding first. Great heel work from Tully and JJ Dillon. Great psychology in this match, if I'm being honest. The way they were drawing to who's going to bleed first. Uh, this wasn't a work rate heavy match by any means, but great psychology and great storytelling. That's why I gave it a 3-star rating. Could have maybe been higher if it went a bit longer, and if maybe there was a bit more to it in terms of the other moves that they did to each other, other work that they did to each other, but still, great stuff. We then had the match we've all been waiting for, the scaffold match between the Warriors, which is Road Warrior and Animal Warrior, Road Warrior Animal and Road Warrior Hawk, as they took on the Midnight Express of Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey, with obviously Jim Cornette at ringside. We'll get into Jim Cornette a little bit later on. The heels are absolutely terrified to climb this thing, and I do not blame them one bit. I would not climb that thing either. It looked dodgy. It looked scary. But yeah, they look so scared, but they're also so limited on top of that scaffolding. Like, what do you expect these guys to do? Guys that are bumpers, guys that are work rate heavy, can do nothing up top there. Eventually, though, the Midnight used powder while on top there into the faces of the Road Warriors, leaving them blinded for the moment. Hawk looks like he's about to be thrown off of the scaffolding, but and then while that's happening, a piece of the scaffolding on the other side actually breaks. I would absolutely shit myself. But anyway, Bobby Eaton then hangs from underneath and then swings like into the support structure and climbs back up from there. And this is when Bobby Eaton gets some color, and I think Dennis Condrey also gets some color. Dennis Condrey also finds himself on the support structures of the scaffolding, and then Hawk goes after him, and they fight it out while on the structures. Like, so dangerous, because the ring is not directly below them. The concrete is directly below them at this point. So dangerous. Bobby Eaton and Hawk then fight in the middle during this, and they're both hanging. Bobby Eaton's hanging, Hawk is hanging, and then eventually, though, they kick each other off. Bobby Eaton falls, and Dennis Condrey falls, and therefore the Road Warriors win the match, because of course that is the only way to win this match. You got to throw your opponent basically off the scaffolding, commit murder basically. After the match, though, Jim Cornette runs away from the Road Warriors, climbs up to the top, and he's met by another Road Warrior there. And Jim Cornette tries to climb down. He's hanging underneath the scaffolding himself, and then he drops and basically goes down. But in real life, we know, if you've listened to anything from Jim Cornette, he basically shattered his ankle and his knee, and whatever the case is, he really hurt himself dropping there. Because, well, he's not a wrestler at the end of the day. He's a manager. This match was, look, it was a spectacle more than anything else. As a match, not great. As a spectacle, fantastic. And these four guys made the spectacle interesting. They made it something worth watching. They made you feel like one of them was going to get badly hurt, and they made you want to keep watching and hope for the best. The ability to keep it interesting was noticeable. Therefore, I gave the match 3 stars. And that might be high, but honestly, as a spectacle, it was pretty damn good, and we got to acknowledge that. We then get into the main event of the Greenboro show, if I'm correct, which is the Rock and Roll Express, as they took on the Minnesota Wrecking Crew for the NWA World Tag Team Championships in a steel cage match. This is the second year I'm seeing the Rock and Roll Express in a steel cage tag team match, but let's get into it. Gibson and Ollie Anderson start things off, but that quickly turns into all 4 men getting involved and just attacking each other. Great stuff. The speed of the Rock and Roll Express is too much for the Andersons early on, and the Rock and Roll begin working on, but he fights back and begins working on the leg of Gibson by smashing it into the cage. The Andersons then begin working the leg of Gibson the whole match, and any attempts to tag in Ricky Morton are stopped. Gibson finally gets the hot tag to Ricky Morton, but the Andersons are quick to pounce and absolutely nullify this hot tag by throwing him into the cage over and over. I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was really, really good heel work. The Andersons then work the arm of Ricky Morton over and over. On goes for a top move, but Ricky Morton fights back with a big punch, but only comes in to stop his momentum straight away before he can get the tag to Robert Gibson. Ricky Morton then ducks a shot from On and hits him with a knee lift, goes for the tag but can't get it, as again, the Anderson stops him from getting the tag to Gibson. On then lands his patented spinebuster for a 2 count onto Ricky Morton. Ricky then again fights back with strikes and jabs to On before crawling towards Gibson, but then Ole Anderson steps in and stops the hot tag again. And even at that point, I was like, oh, so close, so close. Eventually, though, all 4 men get in the ring as Morton goes for a crossbody but gets caught. So Gibson hits a drop kick to Morton, like onto Morton's back, and that puts Ole Anderson on his back with Morton over him, and they get the 1-2-3. The finish was not my cup of tea. I like the actual finish, but I feel like a hot tag was needed before the finish. Like, you could have done the hot tag, everyone going mad, and then had that. But we didn't get the hot tag that was teased and teased and teased and teased. It's like they blueballed us and we didn't get what we wanted, and we didn't get that hot tag, and that was disappointing. The match was excellent, really, really good. Match of the night, in fact. All it was missing from that hot tag, and it could have been a 4+ star match. But unfortunately, because we didn't get that hot tag, I felt let down, and we got 3.75 stars for that match. Honestly, give that hot tag, this might have been like a 4.25 star match. But we didn't get it. Anyway, the Rock and Roll Express retained their titles. And we're now into the main event with Ric Flair versus Nikita Koloff. Pre-match, there was a tribute of some sorts to Magnum TA, who, of course, I mentioned earlier was involved in that car crash months prior. Onto the match, though, Nikita shows his power from the get-go, simply just pushing Flair over every time Flair tries to do something, and this causes Flair to be very hesitant. Nikita then with a pair of hip tosses and a pair of power slams, and these power slams just threw Flair halfway across the ring. Flair dodges a corner attack from Nikita though and follows it up with a suplex, which Nikita just no-sells and stands up. Eventually though, Flair gets Nikita into the corner, lands some chops, but is quickly stopped by Nikita like a brick wall as Flair, I think, tried to land a running attack onto him and just bounced off him. Nikita then gets sent over the top rope to the outside, where Flair can finally get some momentum as he targets the leg of Nikita, which I think the story going into this was that they have weak legs. The Four Horsemen were constantly saying this. I think they mentioned that on commentary. Flair then locks in the figure 4 and uses the ropes as leverage, but then eventually after quite some time, I must say, Nikita rolls the hold over, but Flair was tied into the ropes, so it was the ref broke it up. Flair then lands some big strikes, but Koloff fires up, pushing him down onto the mat again over and over. Nikita then gets tossed to the outside once again, and this time Flair throws him into the scaffolding at ringside, causing him to bleed. Of course, the scaffolding there from previous matches. Flair then dominates for some time, but Koloff fires up once again. Flair tries to put Koloff back into the scaffolding, but Nikita blocks it and throws Flair face first, this time into the scaffolding, causing him to bleed. The ref gets bumped out of the ring, and Nikita lands a big clothesline, pins Flair, but there's no ref to make the count. A second ref comes in, he gets clotheslined. Tommy Young comes back in, who was the first ref. He gets pushed down multiple times by Koloff, who's firing on all cylinders, now angry at Flair, choking Flair, and then this causes a DQ. That's how the match ended. This match needed a finish of some sort. I'm not saying someone needed to get the win, because obviously it was a double title match, unfortunately, which is why we got this finish. But there could have been some other way to do it. I know it wouldn't have gone to a time limit draw because Nikita Koloff cannot work 60 minutes, but I don't know. It didn't work for me. It felt silly to me. It felt like it made Nikita look silly. The match was good though, but nothing flashy over the top. Good character work as both wrestlers wrestled their gimmicks that they were meant to. Nobody looked out of place. Nikita Koloff was the dominant man, and Ric Flair was the hesitant heel. Like I said, the finish was not it for me, but the match was still really good. And with the good finish, the match could have been a higher rating as well. 3.75 stars for this rating for this match. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this Starrcade a lot more than previous Starrcade. It felt like there was a lot less fodder on the card, a lot less matches that meant nothing, a lot less shorter matches. Every match felt like it meant something to that story. I enjoyed this Starrcade much more than last year's Starrcade. Perhaps the main event wasn't as exciting, but still enjoyable. Still enjoyable. And of course, match of the night was the tag team match between the Minnesota Wrecking Crew and the Rock and Roll Express. Now, you guys let me know what you guys thought of this pay-per-view, of this show. And yeah, time to get our very next video actually will be our top 10 matches of 1986. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully I'll get it to you guys out in a couple of days. It does take me a little while to watch a whole bunch of matches aside from these two shows that we've done in 1986. So with that being said, hopefully you guys enjoy this, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.